I remember the first time she looked at me, not just glanced, not just passed me by, but really looked, like I was the only one in the room. She had this way of pushing her hair back when it fell across her face, annoyed, quick, never graceful. And yet, that tiny imperfection made her unforgettable. We were young, 23, wild enough to think love was the answer to every question, bold enough to believe forever was ours for the taking. Our wedding was small, nothing like the one I had last weekend. A rented hall with bad carpet, a DJ who thought Bon Jovi was still new. But none of that mattered. What mattered was her walking down the aisle. I told myself, this is it. This is the woman I will cherish, the woman I will never betray. We built a life, a house, a daughter, my little girl, perfect, fragile, louder than the whole world. For a while it was enough. But love has seasons. And ours turned. At first it was just fatigue, that's what she said, stress. She brushed it off like she brushed back her hair, quick, annoyed, unwilling to look weak. But then came the diagnosis, breast cancer. I promised myself I would stand by her. I did. I went to every appointment, sat through every treatment, lived in hospitals that smelled of disinfectant and despair. But here's the part no one talks about. Illness doesn't just attack the body, it attacks the marriage. She grew harder, sharper, her voice turned into something I hardly recognized. She started criticizing me, not just once, not just in anger, constantly. She said the cologne I wore made her nauseous. She asked if I even bothered to shower before coming to see her. She said I looked disgusting. I tried to explain, told her I had just come from work, but she cut me off. She said all I ever talked about was work. And then she told me that if I cared for her with half as much energy as I did chasing deals, maybe she wouldn't feel worthless. Worthless. That was her word. But the truth is, I carried it with me. I tried to fix things. I cooked meals she wouldn't eat, bought scarves to hide what chemo took, held her when she cried, but little by little she used her pain like a weapon. She told me I was a terrible husband, that I didn't understand her, that I didn't know how to love her anymore. At work I was somebody, at home I was nobody. I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, asking myself how I had become invisible in my own house. But leaving a sick woman, that would make me a monster. And so I stayed. One night, I remember she looked at me, eyes that once held promises, now cold, and she told me flatly that I disgusted her. No shouting, no anger, just fact. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. I realized I was married to a ghost of the woman I once knew, that the love I'd been clinging to wasn't coming back. But still, I stayed, because that's what you do when the world is watching. Because leaving would mean I abandoned a dying woman, and that was a story I could not live down. That was the first act of my marriage. Not a fairy tale, not a tragedy, something in between. But it set the stage for everything that came after. They say grief has 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I lived them all, not for the death of my wife, at least not yet, but for the death of our marriage long before her body gave out. And then, something unexpected happened. It didn't look like salvation at first. It looked ordinary, a business meeting. She was there, not even supposed to be at the table. 21, just a client's assistant. She fetched coffee, passed papers, smiled politely. But she laughed at something I said. Do you know how long it had been since someone laughed at my words? Not out of pity, not out of bitterness, just laughed. Like I was funny, like I was worth listening to. I had forgotten that feeling. It started with small things. A text here, an email there. Always professional, or so I told myself. But then came late nights, quiet conversations after everyone had gone home. And in those moments, I felt something I thought was gone forever. She didn't see a broken man. She didn't see a ghost. She saw me, and she liked what she saw. To be seen after years of invisibility, it was like oxygen. At home, I was a shadow. At work, I was a tool, but with her, I was alive. Yes, she was young, too young, people whisper, but her fire lit something in me I thought was dead. She once asked me why I always looked sad when I thought no one was watching. I laughed it off, told her I was fine. But she pressed. She told me she could see it in my shoulders, in the way I held my breath before speaking. She said someone had broken me, and she was right. At first, it wasn't physical. It was connection, a hand on mine when no one was looking, a secret smile across a crowded room. But eventually, it became physical. And when it did, I remembered what passion was. There was no shame, no criticism, no disgust, just tenderness, laughter, hunger. And for the first time in years, I felt like a man who could give, not just endure. I know how it sounds. I know the names you're thinking: homewrecker, cheater, weak man who couldn't stand by his wife. But listen, I didn't leave because of the cancer. I left because cancer had already stolen her heart, and with it, our marriage. I left because I could not survive another year, another month, another day of being told that my very existence was repulsive. I left because someone reminded me I was still alive. The decision came quickly. One night I told my wife I couldn't keep living like this. She laughed, cold, bitter, and asked if I meant living with a dying woman. She said sorry, that she was such a burden. I tried to tell her it wasn't the sickness, that it was us, that we were over. And then she asked me who the other woman was. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That was the night the truth broke us. And honesty has a cost. Mine was my daughter. She was 15. Old enough to understand betrayal, young enough to turn her grief into rage. She believed what her mother's family told her, that I had left because of the cancer, that I had abandoned her mother when she needed me most. And she turned that belief into hatred. She called the woman I loved a homewrecker, a prostitute, worse. And I let her. Because how do you argue with grief? How do you explain to a child that sometimes surviving means walking away? You don't, you just take it. That was how the new flame began, not out of malice, not out of weakness, out of desperation. She reminded me of life, and I clung to her like driftwood in a storm, because when you've been invisible for too long, being seen feels like salvation. Last weekend I got married again, not in a cathedral, not in a ballroom, but at my parents' house, the one that's been in our family for generations. A place with creaking stairs and walls that have heard more secrets than any confessional. It was meant to be small, intimate, only immediate family. That's what we told ourselves anyway. But intimacy doesn't guarantee peace. We arrived early, my new wife and I. She was radiant, nervous but radiant, and I kept telling myself, this is our fresh start, our beginning, a clean page, and my daughter, my little girl, was supposed to arrive later. That was the plan. She'd drive up, join us, stand witness. She didn't have to smile. She didn't have to approve. She just had to be there. But she wasn't. We waited. Guests asked where she was. My side of the family whispered. My parents called her name across the yard as if she'd suddenly appear from the trees. But she never came. Later I learned she'd gone to her aunt's instead. She chose absence. She chose defiance. And in that absence, in that empty chair where she should have been, everything cracked. I tried to smile through it. I tried to hold my wife's hand and pretend it didn't matter, but every time I looked around, I saw it. The missing face, the missing daughter. And I could feel the questions burning in the eyes of everyone there. Where is she? Why isn't she here? What kind of father can't even get his own child to his wedding? It was chaos wrapped in silence, and I felt it like a blade against my skin. Afterward, when the guests had gone and the lights were dimmed, I asked myself, how could she do this to me? How could my daughter, my flesh and blood, turn her back on me at the one moment I needed her most? The answer came quickly. Because she doesn't see me as her father anymore. She sees me as the man who broke her mother, the man her mother's family painted as weak, selfish, cruel, and she believed them. She believed their poison. It wasn't the first time she'd shown me her anger. She's called my wife names: homewrecker, prostitute, slut. She spits the words like fire, hoping they'll burn holes in me. I told myself to be patient, that she was grieving, that grief has its own language, its own violence, but grief is not a free pass to cruelty. And last weekend, when she chose not to come to my wedding, she crossed a line. So I acted. I took away her car, her allowance, her phone, all of it, because I cannot, will not, let my daughter believe that disrespect is without consequence. My parents disagreed. They told me I was being too harsh. They said punishment wasn't the way to reach her, but I know my daughter. If I allow her to live in that narrative, if I allow her to believe she can spit venom and still be rewarded, still be indulged, then I lose her forever. Discipline is not cruelty. Discipline is love wearing armor. But I won't lie to you, it hurts. Every time I think of her face, her little girl face from years ago when she clung to me with both arms and believed I was her hero, I feel the fracture. And now, to her, I am no hero. I am the villain of her story, and maybe I am. I ask myself sometimes late at night what story she tells herself. She tells herself I left her mother because she was sick. She tells herself I couldn't handle the ugliness of cancer. She tells herself I traded a dying wife for a younger woman who made me feel alive. And maybe that's not entirely untrue, but nobody chooses cancer. Nobody. I didn't leave because she was sick. I left because the sickness had already swallowed us whole. I stayed longer than most men would have. I endured until there was nothing left of me. And then I left because I wanted to live, not just survive. But my daughter doesn't see that. She sees betrayal. She sees abandonment, and so she punishes me, and I punish her back. It is a war fought not with weapons, but with silence, distance, and the withholding of love. And I don't know who will win. At the wedding, my wife's hand was warm in mine. She smiled, even with the whispers around us. She stood there and believed in me, believed in us. And I realized something. My daughter cannot learn to respect her if she continues to hear the poison from her mother's side of the family. And so I made my choice. I cut her off. Until she can come to me, not with rage, not with contempt, but with the willingness to see me for who I am, not the villain she's been told about. My parents think I've lost my way. They call me cruel, but I ask you, what kind of father would I be if I let my child believe hatred has no cost? What kind of father would I be if I allowed her to tear down the woman I love without consequence? What kind of father would I be if I let her absence, her rebellion, define the rest of our lives? So here I am, a man who stood by his wife until he was broken, and a man who found life in the arms of someone new, a man whose daughter has turned away from him. And I wonder if I've been harsh. I wonder if I've been selfish. I wonder if I've done the right thing. And I ask you, because I don't know anymore, am I the asshole?